Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. First of all, I just want to say I hope everybody had a beautiful Pesach, meaningful Pesach. I apologize I didn't send out information last week about no class, but I think most of you knew that there wasn't a class. For those that didn't, I apologize. I thought I mentioned it the week beforehand. We are just a little introduction to the time that we're in. I know we're talking about this in the morning minute, but in our class we like to incorporate a lot of different things that have to do with Lashon Hara, and we will talk about this briefly in the morning minutes. But we're in a period called Sfirat Omer. Sherry just joked about my beard. She wants to know if it grew in a couple hours. Right, it's actually a week, right? A little over a week. But the question is, why am I growing my beard, right? No, it's not because I'm looking for a new style. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm not growing a beard right now, right? So the question is, right, why am I growing my beard? And there's other things during this period of time that people don't do. For example, we don't listen to live music. We don't listen to, a lot of people extend that, most people extend that to even CDs and things like that. We don't have weddings during this period of time. Now there's actually two customs about this. There's some people do it, there's actually three customs, right? Primarily two customs and one custom that's very few people do. And that is, some people started from the beginning of Sfirat Omer, right? We're in the period called Sfirat Omer, the counting of the Omer. They start this mourning period of no haircuts, no music, no weddings. From the beginning of, we start counting from Sfirat Omer, which is during Chol Hamoed, during Pesach, until Lag BaOmer, like 33 days. Everybody agrees, the two opinions agree that you have to do this mourning for 33 days, right? Some say that you should do this mourning for 33 days, starting from the beginning of the Sfirat Omer until Lag BaOmer, and some start from Rosh Chodesh Iyar, which is next week, right, until right before the holiday of Shavuot. It goes up until around the holiday of Shavuot, but also for 33 days. And I don't want to get into the debate of why there's different opinions. It's a fascinating discussion, right, based on other laws. But the question that I want to talk about is, what's this 33 days, and why is there mourning, and why am I talking about in a class that we're going to talk about Lashon Hara? All right, so that's not such a big question. We've gone off topic many times, right? But the question is, right, what is the reason why we have this mourning? So there's a very famous story in the Talmud, right? And for those that know, it's a good review, and we'll try to expand on it and give a little more meaning for those that don't know it, right? It's a very interesting story. So almost everybody is familiar with Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva is one of the most famous rabbis, right? Like Hillel, not referring to the institution in colleges, the Hillel, it's named after Hillel, the rabbi, right? He's another very famous rabbi. But Rabbi Akiva is also very famous. Even in the most secular world, most people have heard of Rabbi Akiva, right? And Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students. 24,000 students. We don't even have that many Jews in Jacksonville, right? If you add the Jews in Jacksonville and Savannah and Orlando, right, you probably still don't get 24,000, right? Maybe, give or take what is, roughly. But 24,000 students. And during this period of time, for 33 days, they perished. A magefa, a disease. We're familiar, unfortunately, with pandemic, right? A pandemic went out. I guess they didn't have face masks and they didn't social distance, right? But I don't think it would have made any difference, right? A pandemic went out and 24,000 of his students died in 33 days, right? Right? The CDC would have gone nuts, right? There would have been, the whole Israel would have been shut down and all that stuff. But besides the point, 24,000 students died in 33 days. And the question is, why? What happened? Why did 24,000 students of Akiva die in this period of time? And Why do they die? Well, why did God bring on this very interesting type of magefa, of pandemic? Because it didn't spread anywhere else. It stuck just with his students. It wasn't like a breakout in the land of Israel. It was his students only. What happened? So, as we know in Judaism, right, and we've talked about this last year in the beginning of the COVID pandemic, right, and we constantly, different rabbis speak about it, and different spiritual leaders, right? We believe that, of course, there's the laws of nature, and but we believe that God allows certain things to come into fruition for different reasons and to teach us different things. And in everything that happens, there's a rhyme and reason. It's not because it happens to be the cycle of the world or whatever it is, right? The way the sun rested on this thing or whatever it is, like all these different things. There's a reason behind all that. And there's a reason why those things happen. And sometimes we don't know exactly the reason. We don't have the exact knowledge, but we could learn different things. We could see what is being caused by this, and usually those are the things that we have to work on, right? And we could talk about this for hours, but that's not today's discussion. Today's discussion is trying to figure out why, and the Talmud tells us, right? We think we had great rabbis of the Talmud to allow us and to let us know why did the students of Akiva perish. And you know why? It says, they did not show proper respect to each other. So the Talmud says. They did not show proper respect to one another. And that's why that sounds a little harsh. It doesn't say that they were hitting each other. It didn't say that they were fighting with each other. It says they did not show proper respect to each other. The question is, what is the meaning behind this statement? They did not show proper respect for each other. That's a reason to wipe out 24,000 students? You know what kind of loss that was? These are tremendous Torah scholars. It could have been so much Torah. These 24,000 students all could have had, even if they would have all had 100 students, they would have had 50 students. Can you imagine? So what's this Lanahagu Kavod Zebazeh? There's many different ideas that are said, and I want to suggest something. I've seen this numerous different places. I don't recall the exact person or sefer that I might have seen this in, and therefore I can't say it in the name of anybody. But a lot say this. Maybe it was Chaim Shmulevitz, maybe it was others, or Dessler. Right? A lot of people sort of putting together different thoughts. They say something very powerful, and this is where it ties into Lashon Hara. When you don't show proper respect for one another, the Talmud gives examples that when they were talking and learning, they would interrupt each other. Right? They would interrupt each other. They would sort of just brush by people, each other, and sort of not communicate really. Right? And other examples that the Talmud gives. It sounds a little elementary, like really. But we have to understand that we're talking about great Torah sages, right? And God always magnifies, right, the actions of the righteous, right? The greater you are, right, the more diligent you have to be within yourself, and the more consequences you have when you're not up to the level of standards you're supposed to be, right? We have this in the secular society too, right? It's supposed to be that way, right? People of higher standards are held to a higher standard, right? Someone that is, for whatever reason, either homeless or other things, right? They might not, the police might look the other way sometimes, okay, whatever, but someone of a higher standard would, do something that's a little immoral, but not wrong or whatever it is. We're like, oh my gosh, like how can he do that? Or how could she do that, right? Our standards of our society, unfortunately, have dipped a lot. So, even people of higher standards do certain things that might not be appropriate. But the concept is that people that are officially more aristocratic or more whatever, they are held to a higher standard. Judges or whatever it is, we expect more out of them. So too, people of more refined nature in their spirituality, right? People that have worked and delved into perfecting their learning and their character trait and their relationship with God, God takes something that seems a little minor to us, like we'd say, okay, so give a nice drasha. The rabbi should give a sermon, right? They should listen to some morning minutes, right? About, how to listen to one another and to behave. But okay, at least they're not fighting, right? At least they're not fighting. We don't have to get anger management in here, right? That's what we look at, ourselves, me including talking myself. But for people of such high caliber, God said, no. They're past that. They have so much Torah knowledge. They have grown in their spirituality that for an infraction of this nature, and we're going to talk about what this infraction really is. Those are just examples of what the infraction comes from. But an infraction of this nature, there's a core problem, right? That there's an off balance over here, and God decided that decreed for them to have the magay, to have the pandemic. What is this infraction really? What are we supposed to learn from this? Right? Yes, we're supposed to learn to be nicer to one another. But what is the really the roots behind what is really going on over here? And the commentaries explain that the idea of lo nohagu kavod zeh b'zeh, right, means to say that they were really revolved around themselves. That if you dug down and you found the roots of their level of spirituality, and again, this is with a magnifying glass. This is with the highest level of magnification. If we were there, if it was out, we would say we'd be praised. But on their level of spirituality and being highest level of magnification, to be able to find, God said, there's something rotten over there. There's a bad seed over there. Of what? Of being revolved around oneself. Being revolved around themselves. And God said, I can't have these students who are such great Torah scholars, and everybody around them sees them as great Torah scholars, and they are, and they deserve a level of greatness. But they can't go ahead and educate the next generation because there's this root foundation of being revolved around oneself, and that cannot spread. That Torah cannot be transmitted through something like that. And therefore, I want to expand on that in a minute. Therefore, after that, Rabbi Akiva had 5 students. 5 students. Went from 24,000 right, to 5 students. Probably a lot of empty space in the Beit Midrash, right, in the study hall. Right? But he went from 24,000 students to 5 students. And those 5 students are Shimon Bar Yochai, right, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Lezer, and some other great Torah scholars who the Torah came through. What is this? What's this terrible thing about the being revolved around themselves? And again, we're not talking about revolved around themselves that didn't give charity. We're not talking about revolved around themselves that they didn't, they didn't respect. They didn't say hello to each other. We're not talking about being revolved around themselves that they, fought with each other. They were arrogant. We're talking about a magnification of being revolved around themselves. And why did God feel that? That's such a terrible thing, being revolved around themselves, that even if there's a sliver, a small little tiny thing, that we have to magnify it to be able to see what it is, that's a problem with being for Torah to be transmitted to the next generation. And the answer is, my friends, because he who is revolved around themselves can never truly respect someone else. And the key of the transmission of the Torah, the key of being able to truly connect to spirituality, is by realizing that we are just part of a collective, right? To borrow from the Borg, for those that are my Star Trek friends, right, fans, right? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you think I'm crazy, right? But to borrow from the Borg, right? We're really part of a collective. We really have to be one-minded. We're not like the Borg. We're independent. We do our own thing, right? But we have to be one-minded, because to truly become Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, we have to get to the level that the Jewish people were at Mount Sinai. And this is why it's during this period of time, the Sfirat Omer, where we're getting to Har Sinai. We're getting to receiving the Torah. What does it say? Famous, and we're going to talk about this again in the morning minutes, famous line, we've said this many times. It says in the Torah, when the Jewish people reached Mount Sinai, Ki ish echad b'lev echad, the Jewish people were like one person with one heart. They reached a level of independence, but unity, that they were considered like one body, one person, one heart, to do the will of God and to connect with each other. They reached this, the epitome of unity, of togetherness. There's sort of all different parts of the body, right? Separated, but working in unison. One large body of the Jewish people. Ki'ish echad, like one person, belev echad, with one heart. And when we're able to reach that level of thinking about the other person, caring about the other person, it's not only the idea of midot, which is one of the essential things of Judaism, done within the confines of Jewish law, as we mentioned many times in the laws of ethics of our father and other things. What society thinks is moral or not moral is not what necessarily we think. We have Torah guiding us, but that's for a different discussion. But it has to be also to truly connect to Torah, to truly believe in God, and to truly then, if you believe in God, then truly reach the highest level of spirituality that we can't be revolved around ourselves either. Because if we're revolved around ourselves, then we have a hard time letting in something else that we don't, that's not really us. So of course these students, reached levels of spirituality that God judged them on this fine line. So of course they brought in spirituality, but God said, no, I see an infraction, a small infraction that's rooted in the roots over here. And since these are going to be the educators, that's a problem. Back to us, that's what we have to learn. That's what we have to work on during this period of time. During this period of time, we have to work on reminding ourselves that we cannot be revolved around ourselves. During this period of time, we have to digest and reflect and say, hey, I'm not on the level of the 24,000 students, but where could I work on myself to be thinking about others? Where could I maybe be a little nicer to other people that way will, I had a conversation with one of my kids the other day, right? And I told him this line, I think we talked about this before, Chitzonios me'or the pnimios. The actions, the external actions that we do, ma'orer, they enhance, they awaken, that's a better word. They awaken the inside, means our feelings. So even though we might not feel that way exactly, but when we do something, eventually becomes routine, which has its flaws, but has its good, right? And then we start believing in it. We start doing it. And this has many ramifications for laws of tzniut, modesty, for laws of talking, for laws of Shabbat, for whatever it is. When you start doing something, even in the beginning, I don't really feel it so much. It becomes part of your routine. You feel it more. And we can't just let it stay routine. We have to understand it and think about it. That's the next level. It's the same thing with the way we talk. Same thing with the way we act. Same thing with the way we think about other people. So during this period of time, to truly become vessels of spirituality, to be able to receive the Torah, not only do we have to perfect our ability to read the language of the Torah and to be able to learn the laws, of course, we have to work on that. But we also, and more during this period of time, in essence, really, we have to work on that the actual vessel is a vessel that will allow us to transmit the Torah and to learn the Torah. And that's a vessel that is a vessel of thinking about other people. That's not revolved around oneself. It's mind-boggling. And just to expand a little more, and if you go through the Sfirot, if you open up the article Sidur, right, really any Sidur, right, but when you go to Sfirat HaOmer, it's actually not in the article Sidur. Yeah, it is. Page 286, if you have an article Siddur there, right? So that's how the Sfirat HaOmer looks. Right? So if you notice, right, on the side over here, it says Sfira, right? It says Sfira right there, right? And the Sfira there, right, is every day something else. And it says, it doesn't have it in the English. I don't know, I just didn't do it in the English, but I'll read it in the Hebrew. First day is Chesed, Simach Chesed. right? Kindness of kindness. The next day is Gvuras B'Chesed, right? And there's 7 Sfirot, right? And we talked about this over Sukkot, also the 7 Sfirot representing the 7 special guests, right? There's Chesed, there's kindness, right? There's Gvura, there's strength, there's Tiferes, which is a hard word to translate, right? Netzach, Hod, Yesod, right? These different ones. And there's one for the week and there's one for the day. And the first day is the first day in the first week, so it's chesed of chesed. You have to work on how to incorporate kindness and kindness to the highest level. Then the next day is the day is gevura. Number 2 is strength, but the week is still chesed. So you have to learn how. You have to work on how to be assertive and strong, and not allow yourself to be pushed over or bent to pressure or things like that in your spiritual growth, which is something very important, or also being a pushover. But at the same time, make sure that it's still within the categories of chesed, of kindness. Right? We're not dictators. We're not mean people. So every day there's other things, and then we go to the next week. It's gevura, right? The week is gevura, and then so you have to work how to do chesed with gevura. Meaning if you're more of a kind person or things like that, but at the same time, I'm working on Gevura. So there's books that are written on how to work on this, and I'm not going to go, that's not our class today, and maybe we'll do a lunch to learn after speak to the JCA, right? And we'll expand more on this, right? But the idea is we see that with built into the Sfirot are built the concept of working on our attributes, and working on ourselves. Because that is the avoda, that's the work that we're supposed to do. And that's why the students of Akiva passed during this time. And that's why God said this infraction, even though it's so minor, but for these students, on their level, they shouldn't have such an infraction. Number 2, more importantly, for them to be then go and transmit the Torah to the Jewish people and to teach the Jewish people the Torah, for them to be the teacher of the Jewish people, the next generation, the problem. I can't have that. So yes, we mourn their loss because so much Torah was lost. Because again, it's a minor fraction that we probably won't even see. So we mourn the loss, and therefore we don't shave and we don't listen to music and other things, and don't get married during this period of time. But the most important thing that we have to remember is to learn of how to better ourselves because of this. And my friends, that's the conversations we're always talking about in Lashon Hara. If we're able to build to a level that we're thinking about other people, if we're able to build to a level of where we realize the harm of Lashon Hara, and when we come to the level of realize, right, that Lashon Hara is something that is devastating, right? Then we would be so much more careful of how we talk. We would be more conscious about what comes out of our mouth because we're thinking about other people, or we want to make sure that we're not harming other people. So it's there's always something to connect to it, but. Sviras Omer, the students dying, it wasn't exactly Lashon Hara, but the root is the root of where Lashon Hara comes from also. And Lashon Hara is a byproduct of something. It's not a thing of itself. The byproduct of Lashon Hara is not really thinking about other people. It's thinking about yourself. You need to get this off your chest, right? You want to make sure that you feel it's justified to tell someone how it is, right? And we'll talk about 2 examples today, and we'll get into examples. And there's different forms of Lashon Hara, as we spoke about, either just saying malicious things about someone else, right? If you feel that you are, sometimes we come with good intentions. But when we come in with good intentions, that's when we have to open up the magnifying glass and say, 1 second, is this good intentions? Or is there really a legitimacy to do this? And if there's no legitimacy to this, and then it's then I have to just get it off my chest. I've had a conversation with someone once, right? I had a conversation with someone once, right? And I remember they after back and forth, they said, I don't think this is really appropriate to, spread or to tell the person. And the person's response was, but I just feel that I need to say something. I just think it's the right thing. I said, that's all very nice, but halakhically you're not allowed to, so it's the wrong thing. So it's nice how you feel, and you think it's the right thing, but halakhically you're not allowed to, so it's the wrong thing. And the person says, you're not doing it because really the right thing. You're doing it, you're justifying it because I don't speak Lashon Hara, but if you dig down, what is because you need to get off your chest. What's that? Being revolved around yourself. So now we sugarcoat it and we box it very nicely with nice wrapping paper. I'm a tzaddik, right? I'm a righteous person. I'm doing it because to prevent the catastrophe in the Jewish people, right? The community needs to know what this person did, or the rabbi, or the spouse, or the children, neighbors. I'm an activist. I'm a Lashon Hara activist. You're not. The only thing you're doing is you're saying Lashon Hara. We do that a lot of times. Sometimes it's right. That's where we're learning the laws of Lashon Hara. But I'm just showing an example of where we have this also, and I'm talking to myself, where we have to push away and we have to take the magnifying glass like God did with the students. Say, 1 second, what's really going on here? What's really going on here? So that's just a little introduction, right? The days that we are in now and how that connects to our learning, right? And I think it really, for me, it really, puts it into reality of how this really could affect what's really the source behind it. And most of us are good people, right? Everybody on the Zoom, right, and listening to this class, of course, is good people. But most of humanity are good people, and they don't want to be considered people that are revolved around themselves. They want to be considered people that are open-minded and want to help other people and care about other people. Sometimes we don't even realize it. That's where the evil inclination, that's what we have to work on ourselves. We're not perfect. And so if we realize that, hopefully it'll give us a boost to focus more and to be more aware of the actions that we do and also what comes out of our mouth. Any questions? I know I've been talking now for a little while, and y'all been very generous and quiet, right? And I got some positive criticism. I don't know if criticism is the wrong word from a friend last time that I just sort of talked and I didn't let anybody talk. And you guys are very respectful, so you don't want to interrupt me. And again, there I go, talking, right? If anybody has any questions or comments, please unmute yourselves and go ahead. Okay, wow. Are you sure? No one will...
Rabbi, hi, this is Jim.
Hey, Jim.
I was listening to what you said, and it's very simple concept, and I think you're exactly right. And I'm very guilty of it a lot of times, that I think I'm being noble and helping somebody, and all I'm doing is feeding my own ego. So thank you for the little talk this morning. I think I saw more of myself than I wanted to in that, but that's a good thing.
Honesty is the first step of redemption. So good job. And I'm talking to myself too. So score. Thank you. Anybody else? Questions, comments, or go ahead, Emily.
No, I was just going to say it's good. It's good for all of us, Jim. We all need to hear it.
Okay, so let's get to some practical cases, and as in the past, if anybody, before we go to the halacha, I want to hear what your thoughts are. So it's going to be a little more interactive now. So if I remember correctly, we are on page 138, day 40. Wow, day 40. Look at that. 40 is, a very mystical number. Going to get a little off topic for a second. 40 we know is the number of rejuvenation, of starting over. And the Jewish people were in the desert for 40 years because there had to be a new start. Moshe was up in heaven for 40 days because it allowed him to sort of start the next generation of Torah coming down to earth. The flood was for 40 days. A baby we consider the baby becoming a fetus at day 40. So 40, as we know, the mikvah has to be 40 sa. The spiritual water has to be a measurement of 40 cubic sa, which is a measurement. So we're on day 40 and we're after Pesach now, and we had a little break and we're starting up again. So I think it's really cool that we're on day 40 when we're sort of starting up again. So to give us a chizuk, a good strength to move forward. So it's a little tidbit, which I just got inspired. All right, so the dilemma is like this. You work at a desk next to the company's top salesman. You've heard from him or her making travel arrangements that he passed or she passed off as business trips, but are really personal getaways for him and his wife or vice versa. And he's stealing money from the company. Right? But given his egotistic personality, you know that he will never accept reproof from you. However, you daven at the same shul as he does. Always a coincidence that this person always davens in the same shul. Well, okay, it happens a lot. If you let's say in the same city. Here in Jacksonville, of course, we only have one Orthodox synagogue, or we have some other synagogues. So typically, if you're a neighbor or whatever, you're in the same vicinity, right? But however, you daven at the same shul as he does. May you ask your Rav to speak to the individual, even though the Rav has no firsthand knowledge of the shady practice. Okay, guys, what do you guys think? Craig, what's on your mind?
That's a tough one.
That's why I asked you, Craig.
Because it could impact a lot of other individuals. So, if it's a small company, for example, and they're very tight window, and what if it's significant embezzlement, and then the company may have to lay off people because they don't, they're losing money, not knowing what's going on. I don't know. That's. I think you have to. It's a judgment call.
Okay, so I want to hear from other people. I'm just going to respond to what Craig said. So Craig, you're going in the direction of what for the company's sake, right? What we're discussing is over here. Are you allowed to say something to the rabbi, right? To tell the guy what he's doing wrong. We're not talking if you're allowed to go ahead and tell your bosses of what the person did, right? The boss is not, the rabbi is nothing to do really with how the company is doing. The company's not. You just want to, tell this guy, hey, what you're doing is not really right. Maybe it's, sort of a little shady. It's maybe there's a gray area, right? And we're not getting into the whole debate if it's really he's allowed to. Maybe it's part of his perks, and maybe not. For you feel that it's wrong, right? And right? But it's sort of in a shady area, right? So if you're allowed to go talk to your bosses, we've talked about that a little before, right?
Yeah.
And that's a separate discussion, right? Over here is you wanna help this guy out. You don't want him to do something wrong, right? You don't want him to get him fired. You want him to get him in trouble, right? But you want to help him out. So the guy's not going to listen to you. So are you allowed to go to a third party, which is a rabbi, right? Oh, always blame the rabbis, right? But you're in a third party, so you're telling the third party, you're telling the rabbi what this person is doing. Is that constitutes as lashon hara? So the question is regarding lashon hara, and not necessarily regarding about the business practice of the office.
Okay.
That's another discussion. Okay, so just to clarify that for everybody else. Any other thoughts? No one? Emily, you don't have anything to say?
I have to. I'm just actually finding my book because I didn't totally understand what you said. So I'm just looking at the dilemma.
Okay.
I think if I could get my redo.
Oh yes, you got to redo. We're into second chances.
Because you can't assume things. So if you're assuming on something, it would be lashon hara. So I would say you can't do that.
Okay, so now, so just to nitpick on yours again, because I love you so much, right? So you're saying that this person, you're understanding that this individual is assuming that he's doing something wrong. What happens if he knows he's doing something wrong? He's the lawyer of the company. He knows he's doing something wrong, right? Or even if he's not a lawyer, he knows he's doing something wrong. But now, even though he knows he's doing something wrong, but could he go ahead and tell the rabbi that doesn't know anything, but he's telling him he's telling him? I mean, that's lashon hara, right? So, but you're doing it because you want the rabbi to go ahead and help this guy out, right? But that's sort of the dilemma.
Right.
Yeah, Emily, you had a chance to look at it yet?
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's, if someone is harming themselves, it's one thing, but if somebody is harming another person or an organization, right? I think that, to me, that's different, right? Like, then it, you know, it's not right. Like, he's stealing. And so I think that, and if he's not going to listen to you, then I think that you should, I personally I would speak to the rabbi, because I think it's a chil Hashem. And I think that he doesn't have the right to hurt somebody else.
Okay. We'll take that under advisement. Anybody else?
I agree with Emily.
You agree with Emily? Okay, Simba.
Yes.
I agree with Emily also.
Okay, Emily, you got some. Sorry, Craig.
I got 2 votes.
2 votes. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Okay, so this.
Wait. Let me say.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, maybe he should say something to the person. No,
The person.
maybe the person that's doing it doesn't really realize that it's the wrong thing to do. So maybe first he should approach the person and say something to him.
Okay, so that's a great point. So the way they're putting down the scenario is that the individual doesn't want to go to the person because this guy has an ego from today to tomorrow. He's the top salesman. And you're like a little, individual in the company, right? And he's not going to listen to you, right? You've tried his suggestions beforehand, and he's going to brush you off. You don't know what you're talking about, and he's going to brush you off, right? So you feel like by going to the person. All right, which should have been part of the question. Should you still talk to the person, even if you feel that that's going to happen, right? And if he doesn't listen to it, then part 2 is are you able to go to the rabbi? But the way they're presenting it is that you feel uncomfortable going to the guy because you don't feel that it's going to really make any difference, right? About going to the person. But you're 100% correct. If you feel, and that's how they start off the thing, right? If you feel that there might be a slight chance that by going to the person might listen to you, right? Then that's the first step you got to do. You got to go go talk to the person. The question is, if not. So we're entering, and we're probably not going to get time to do the next case. I thought we were going to have time to do more, right? But we had a very nice introduction about Sfiras Omer. Right? We're getting to a new topic that we haven't really talked about in the past, right? And we've started dabbling in it the last one, right, a little bit, right? But this is the concept of teichacha, of rebuke, right? When are you allowed to give rebuke? When are you not allowed to give rebuke, right? And how are you allowed to get someone to give someone else rebuke? Right. So, of course, this falls under the laws of lashon hara because, as we said, lashon hara is not only telling someone else something. Lashon hara is sometimes telling the individual something also. Right. You're talking about the individual, even if you're talking to the person themselves. Right. It's not as severe as talking to someone else, right, about that individual. Right. But it sort of falls into the category now where we're entering a new stage of what about rebuke? Right. Are you allowed to rebuke the individual? And it's very interesting halacha, right? There's a law that says like this, and we talked about this, right? Very we just started talking about it. We're going to expand on it today a little more, right? And we'll next week we'll talk about it even more with the next case, right? And maybe we'll get back to this case a little bit for the introduction, right? Because we're running out of time a little bit, right? But we'll try to finish the introduction today. And there's a very interesting halacha that the Torah says al pishnayim edim, right? Yakum davar, right? According on 2 witnesses, are you able to accomplish a judgment, right? So we know in the laws of judgment, right? Typically it's 2 witnesses. Now there are certain things that we rely on 1 witness, right? Certain laws of money, obligating someone to swear, right? And I'm not getting off topic on that because that is extremely complicated and we could be off topic for a very long time, right? The laws of courthouse and judgments and things like that and witnesses, right? But for our knowledge right now, right, most of the time, right, based in a judge, a rabbi, which is sort of takes over as a judge a lot of times, right? It really is only supposed to accept something if there's 2 witnesses. That's how we work with it, right? We don't work with DNA things or things like that, right? Not for our discussion, right? But with 2 witnesses. Now, what happens if 1 witness comes in? What happens? One person he knows, he's seen something that happens, all right? He saw Reuven kill Shimon, right? He saw that. So if he comes into Beis Din and says that, then what? So the halakha is that we can't accept it. It's only 1 witness. And then if he comes ahead and says that, he's transgressing the aver of Lashon Hara and other things and there's some other things by coming to, there's a prohibition in Torah that one witness should not come ahead and give witness, right, on these kind of laws. Again, there's certain things that he's allowed to, but on these kind of things he's not allowed to. The point I'm bringing out is that there's a 2-pronged question over here. Number 1 is, am I allowed to say something? Number 2, the rabbi, right, is he allowed to take the words of this individual to the extent of saying, 1 second, I have to go ahead and do something about this, which is, again, a lot more complicated, right? And it's tricky because most of the times, we don't have 2 people coming to say something, right? And regarding what laws do we need this and what laws do we don't need this, right? But at the same time, right, the rules of this law is in effect to a certain degree that when, I'll be honest, when I hear something from someone comes and complains something, right? I can't talk for Rabbi Fish, but I'm sure the same thing, right? I have to hear the other side. I don't have to witness it. I have to, I trust this person, but maybe someone else seen things a little different. And it's not solid. And we have to be very careful not to assume automatically and to jump to conclusion based off what one person said something to. Even if they said it with intentions and they would tell us and all the things, and let's get out of that. Regarding the laws of the individual accepting what he heard, is different, is not different, but is a side point, but a very important side point to what the person's allowed to say. And if the person is not able to accept exactly what the person's saying, so then the person that is talking has to be very careful, because then there's no toelis. Because what's the toelis? What's the purpose? What's the benefit? What the reason why you're allowed to speak most of the time is for the accomplishment of bettering the situation, toelis, helping the person out. But if you know that when you're speaking to the rabbi or wherever it is, and they have to be more careful and they're not necessarily able to react to what you said exactly the way you said it, so then you also then have to be careful what you say, because then even though you want to do it for toelis and for the right purpose and for the right reason, but what you want to accomplish might not happen right away, or so you'll then have to be careful how you say it, because you lost now your toelis, right? Which is different than talking to the person directly when it's toelis, because you're accountable. Now it's the question if that person's going to change or not. So, but when you're talking to someone else that you want them to go ahead and talk to that person, you have to be very careful if that person's allowed to accept it. Now over here, since we're dealing with not a character trait, we're not dealing with a behavior, we're dealing, as Craig said, right, a monetary issue, and it could be stealing, it could be halachically a problem, right? So we're not only dealing, when we're dealing with a character, it's things like that, so then when you're saying something, right, again, you have to be careful how you say it, and what the presenter and what you're meaning to say it and how you're saying it. And we went through the different categories, right? But the person that you're talking to has more of a halachic legitimacy to accept what you're saying, because it's not a legal concept of money or other issues, that fidelity or other things like that, right? But when we're dealing with money issues or other sort of halakhic things, we have to be more careful, even though you're just trying to help the person out, that he shouldn't get in trouble, right? So the answer to this question is, let's read what they say. That's sort of an introduction, and we're going to have to tweak a little bit what they say, because the way they say it is more like just for the case, but we try to incorporate it into our daily lives in a more of a broader sense. So what do they say? Even the Rav may not act on haste, right? Which means that theoretically he should not intervene in any situation that he doesn't see for himself, right? As I said, right? The rabbi himself, and this is, they say this in 3 lines, right? But this is very complicated halachas, right? And next week, we'll go through the Chavetz Chaim himself, right? As you all know that we go through this sometimes. He expands on this a little more in the thing and in the Beramar Chaim, right? But it's not necessarily permitted for the rabbi himself to respond right away. Right? For that reason, right, the better alternative is for you to try to address the person directly, like Marilyn said. You have to try, right? Even though you might not, you have to try. Right? Now, if you know for sure the person's not going to listen, without a shadow of a doubt, so that we spoke about before, and it's not to well us, and all you're doing is creating a fight between the two of you, right? And therefore, that's not a purpose, right? If you think that there might be a chance, right? So then, you have to be very careful with your words, like we spoke about beforehand, right? In previous classes, but that's always best to try to speak to them directly. If not possible, you should describe the situation to the Rav and ask him to look into it. Even if he doesn't come to the point where he has firsthand information, you could try to discuss the situation with the salesperson without making accusations, right? So there are ways of trying to talk. You could go to the rabbi and say, hey, listen, I work with this. Yeah. Now, I think I've seen some things and I'm not sure. And, I think maybe it's good to maybe, talk to the person about, the halachas of stealing from other people, or, things that are a little gray area, or as someone else said, I think it was Emily, it could be Chil Hashem, desecration of God's name. He's a Jew working in a non-Jewish company and it's going to come out, or whatever it is, right? And sort of talk to the person discreetly and not directly about accusing the person, but sort of trying to, and direction that you're talking to the rabbi also has to be in a way where you are not accusing the person, right? Because you can't do that, but sort of just making aware of a situation. Now, of course, it's a little more complicated, right? And it's not a clear-cut answer like we are sometimes accustomed to, and we would like, right? Even though a lot of times we don't have clear-cut answers over here, because a lot of things really, as we mentioned, every situation is slightly different based on all the nuances of the case. But that's the basic concept that we're talking about today. Is the main discussion over here is not necessarily so much the individual having the right to speak and say what he's seen, right? But that is if he's able to or not is really affected by the ability of the rabbi or the individual to accept what he heard, right, and react on that. Right, and then since there could be a problem with accepting what he heard and to react on it, and then being accused in a way like that, right? So therefore, that's why the person might not be able to say it in that way either, right? So it's not directly what he's allowed to say, but it's caused by what the rabbi or the individual allowed to accept, and therefore now it travels back to the person what he's allowed to say. So. It definitely, you're supposed to make the rabbi aware of what's going on if you feel that the rabbi will be able to do something about it, right? Or a confidant of the person, right? You're supposed to make them aware and say, hey, you know, I think I've seen this, you know, I don't want to, I'm coming from a good place. I don't want to accuse the person, and, you know, I don't want to get him in trouble, and maybe I saw completely, but, you know, I think it would be appropriate, you know, to maybe just have a discussion with that person and see if you could get it out of him if he's doing that or not doing that. So you're not accusing him, right? You're not saying that the person did something wrong, and you're shedding a little doubt within your words, right, to the person that is receiving it. So it's not necessarily, in other situations, talking like this would be lashon hara, but over here, since there is a concept of toelas, right, so therefore it's not necessarily a lashon hara, right, and the person that's accepting it is not accepting a fact; he's accepting a concern, right, and therefore, right, and he has authority to do something, right, so therefore he's allowed to go ahead and discuss it with that person and discuss and hear that person. And there's going to be some other cases, and as I mentioned, God willing, next week we'll delve into this idea a little more. Let's just end with a quote from Mishlei, right? Page 139. He who guards his mouth and tongue guards himself from trouble. Right? King Solomon famously said, he who guards his mouth and tongue guards himself from trouble. Right? I think that's something very powerful to reflect on. And again, thank you everybody for joining us. I'm going to turn off the recording.